When I was growing up on a farm, the farm was a playground. You found your own entertainment. If friends came round, we try and come up with something exciting to do, and that would be to plait a lot of baler twine together and make a long, thick rope, climb to the top of the barn, lash it round the internal structure of the barn, and then swing from one side to the other. Now, because these structural poles of the barn were so rusty, it wouldn't be too long before your rope would wear through and you would fall very suddenly to earth. Used to use the inner structure of the barn like monkey bars and do really dangerous things, climbing right over the top of a really tall barn, over the blades of a muck spreader, without too much thought about the potential consequences. At school there was this film that they showed us called Apaches, and it was the most horrifying film I'd ever seen, about all these kids playing on a farm who one by one came to a sticky end, falling beneath the wheels of a tractor or getting drowned in a slurry hole. That film was obviously aimed at children like me, but for some reason I didn't equate it to my own life. But I survived to tell the tale. Actually, once I did climb to the top of the hay barn, and I was climbing across the very top, and a bale gave way, and I don't actually remember the fall. I just remember waking up on the concrete and assumed I must have fallen from the top to the bottom of the barn. But I didn't tell my parents. I just didn't say anything. I mean, that's what life was like. Generally, if you did a silly thing, then you just kept quiet about it. I got a really nice penknife for my birthday once, but somehow I managed to lose it in the fields. I didn't tell anyone about that either, but I did spend a long time scouring those fields for my penknife. We were surrounded by cats and dogs, and the chairs were generally quite threadbare because of it. The cats and dogs would hang around next to the Rayburn, which was a log-fueled oven. One exciting day, my dad found a litter of kittens in the haystack up the field. I think there were 6 kittens, and we kept 3 of them. Haymaking time was all hands on deck because one had to get the hay dry and hay baled and the hay brought into the barns. So everybody was needed for that. And we spent a good few weeks hurling bales around. And you get bale blisters. And I generally get 8 blisters on each hand. But all that hard work on the farm did mean that I was pretty much unbeatable at arm wrestling at school. Apart from this one kid who was about a foot taller than me, who really took farming seriously. We called him Oily Hoily. Because when you're at school, nobody uses your actual name. Nobody could beat him at an arm wrestle. Probably the pinnacle of haymaking was when the haystack got so high, we had to get the elevator out. That was a pretty exciting machine. Someone putting the bales on at the bottom and them chugging up to the top and then you hurling them off at the other end. The other exciting thing was the ride home after you've loaded up your trailer of bales. But it always had to be loaded up in a very specific way so that the load did not fall apart when you were bumping across the fields on the way back. That was always fun. Sat on top of the load of bales, you'd make a little nest for yourself on top of that load, and I'd collect up all the little offcuts of orange baler twine and tie them up with 2 circular eyes cut out of paper and stuck on to make a character. My dad named my little characters Billies for some reason. One memorable time was when the fair came to the town and I won a pink fluffy square with eyes on the end of a stick. Anything with eyes on it I liked, and my dad called it the Will-o'-the-Wisp, and I was so happy with that, but I accidentally dropped it in the cow yard and my dad washed it in the water trough, but it never looked or smelt the same again. So after all those months of the cows being inside and doing all that littering, eventually when the weather was fine enough and the cows could go out, we would have to do the mucking out of the barns. And with just a fork and a wheelbarrow, that was quite an intensive job. I think it's true to say that I was a reluctant farmer. And I did quite often try to hide from farm chores. I do remember that very jarring sound of getting a log banged against the ceiling, which would be the floor of my bedroom, to get up and feed the calves on an icy morning. So my brother was always the more serious one about farming. I preferred making whistles, or whittling a stick, or making an eyeball out of papier-mâché, which I did take to school and was very quickly confiscated by the teacher. One of the jobs I didn't mind was going to round up the cows for milking. I used to go off with my stick down to the Hilly Nine and jumping around on my stick. The cows were quite funny. My dad knew them all. They all had names, many of them named after characters from Shakespeare, specifically the fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Cobweb, Moth, Mustard Seed. They all had different personalities, and I did find them quite amusing. So growing up on a farm definitely shaped me as a person and an artist. And my friend Chris reckons that all artists at some point in their childhood knocked themselves unconscious. So maybe if I hadn't fallen out of a haystack, things would be very different today.